Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. It's not been a while, I uploaded a video a few days ago, but it's been a while since I've talked about books. That much is true. The last time I did a what I'm reading or what I've been reading video was July? A full 6 months ago, but seeing as we're at the end of the year now, I feel like this is a good time to finish off telling you everything I read from July to December. It's not a huge amount, I think I've got about 16 books, and I think I'm also gonna do a 2021 top 10 favourite reads of the year, but I'm gonna do that on my Bookstagram, Prattle and Pages, so make sure you head over there and check that out. So let's dive right in. This is everything that I read from July to December. Let's go. A book I finished midway through July was Pumpkin by Julie Murphy. This is the same author who wrote Dumplin', which is a movie on Netflix. I watched that movie before I read any of Julie Murphy's books, but this was a 5-star read. I loved this so much. This book is about a boy called Waylon who is openly gay in a very small town in West Texas, and he loves this drag race TV show called Fiercest of Them All, and he makes a video to enter into the next season, and it accidentally gets shared with the entirety of his school, which results in him receiving a joke nomination for prom queen. And instead of being embarrassed by this, he decides to go out with a glittery bang and try and run for prom queen. It's so much fun, I highly recommend it. Next, I read Piranesi, which took a while for me to try and wrap my head around what was going on, but once you're in, you're in. And it starts off slow, but then all of a sudden you find that you're turning the pages quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker, and then when it's over, you genuinely mourn the loss of this book. I won't say too much about this book because I feel like it's so short and so much is packed in there that if I say anything, I feel like I'm giving something away. But it's about this man called Piranesi, I'm not entirely sure which, and he lives in this building that's seemingly filled with endless amounts of halls and rooms, and there's only one other person who he has seen who he calls the other, and he brings him food and water and clothes when he needs it, and as far as Piranesi knows, he has always lived in these halls. And that is all I can say before I start giving away huge plot points, but it's so good. And I promise you, it is slow to start, but just bear with it. Bear with it. My wiggy at Cinderella called Elaine was reading this and I had just bought it and she was like, Carrie, please just read it so I have someone to talk to about this book. And I did, and we talked about it and it was great. So read this by Susanna Clark, it's great. Next up, I read a middle grade book called Whispering to Witches by Anna Dale. I had to re-buy it. I used to have a copy of this. It was one of my favourite books growing up, but it was the one book I couldn't find. Out of all of my books, it was the one book that I could not find, and I was gutted. So I had to re-buy it, but when I re-bought it, it came with a little postcard signed by the author. So that was quite wonderful. And this is just a gorgeous, wholesome story about a boy called Joe who makes a friend called Twiggy who just happens to be a witch, and he kind of gets himself in the middle of a fight between witch covens over this mysterious magical spell book. If you're looking for something autumnal / Christmassy, you can either get it in quickly before this year is out, or I highly recommend for the end of next year. Next, I had a proof copy of You, Me on Vacation by Emily Henry, which I just adored. There was a point where I was reading it and it got like super steamy, far steamier than I expected it to, and I started blushing on a train, but I'm not complaining. This gave me real One Day by David Nichols vibes. It's about two best friends who go on various trips abroad together, and then on one trip they have a bit of a falling out, which means they don't speak for 2 years, but then they have a chance at one last trip together, and it's about trying to salvage what's left of their friendship. Next up, I have another middle grade book, but this time I have a special connection with this one because it's written by Emerald Fennell, who wrote Cinderella. This is Shiverton Hall, and when I tell you this is scary, this is scary. Emerald? Nightmares. This is about a boy called Arthur Bannister who goes to a new school called Shiverton Hall, and the school has lots of secrets and quite a sinister past that Arthur and his friends begin to uncover. This is great. It's so much fun, but it's not for the faint-hearted. It's terrifying, quite frankly. I read a lot of middle grade in this half of this year, but I'm not complaining. This was A Place Called Perfect by Helena Duggan, and I cannot wait to finish this series. This is the beginning of a series of books, and I just loved it so much because it's so original, so unique. It's spooky and a little bit scary, but it's got such a wonderful message behind it. The characters are so lovable, and I just thought it was so imaginative and creative, and I just loved it from start to finish. So this book is about a girl called Violet who has moved to a new town with her parents called Perfect, and for some reason everyone in the town is going blind, and because of that they need to wear these special glasses to help them see properly again. And there are these two brothers called George and Edward who provide these glasses for everyone, and they're just a little bit too sinister for Violet's liking, and she knows there's something going on. And the more her parents stay in this town, the more weird they start behaving, and they start expecting Violet to be perfect, to be the perfect child, and she just can't understand what's going on, and so she does a little bit of digging and finds out the sinister goings-on in this place called Perfect. I need to get the rest of this series because I love this one so much. I think it's great. Highly recommend. Now, the next book I read, I've lost my copy of, and I am devastated. I must have lent it to someone or taken it to the theatre, I'm not entirely sure, but it's The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and oh my god! Oh my god! If you haven't read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I'm actually begging you, please read it. Please, please read it. The hype is real. Just read it. Just read it. It's about this woman called Monique who is asked for specifically by Evelyn Hugo to write a piece on her for the magazine that Monique works at. But then when she gets there, Evelyn Hugo is like, actually, this was sort of a ploy. I don't want you to write a piece for the magazine that you work for. I want you to write my memoir. Essentially, I'm going to tell you everything about my life, about my 7 husbands and the relationships that I had with them and exactly what happened within them. I'm going to tell you about my Hollywood acting career. I'm going to tell you everything right down to the last sordid detail, and I want you to write it and create my memoir. It's a wild ride and it's just so good. Please, please, please read it. It's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have since read more of her books, and she's my favourite author. And I do not say that lightly. She is my favourite author. Amazing. Please read it. Please read it. Then I read On a Night Like This by Lindsay Kelk. Again, I don't have a physical copy of it because I was sent a advanced reading copy on PDF so that I could read it because I did the audiobook for it, and it's such a fun summer read. I loved it. It's about a woman called Fran Cooper who gets hired to be a PA for a very famous singer called Juliet, and she's very difficult to handle. Fran doesn't know whether she's coming or she's going, and Juliet is meant to be performing at this big event called the Crystal Ball, and Fran's pretty much her one and only job is to get Juliet to this event. So when Juliet decides not to turn up and leaves her stranded on this island where the crystal ball is being held, Fran decides she's gonna have an unforgettable night of her own. And it's great. If you want to read it, go ahead and read it, but if you want to listen to me read it to you, I will leave the link below. Now, this book I definitely left at the theatre because I took it to leave in my dressing room for anyone who wanted to read it, because I feel like this is a book that lots of actors should read. It is Hamilton and Me by Giles Terera. Giles was the original Aaron Burr in Hamilton in the UK, and he kept journals whilst he was in the rehearsal process and turned it into Hamilton and Me. And it's just fascinating to read another actor's process and what they go through to originate a role, especially with a role like Aaron Burr, where it's historical and there's so much research that you can do. And Giles really did do so much research on the backstories and the relationships between him and all of the other historical characters in the show. If you're interested in becoming an actor, or you're interested in the history that goes behind Hamilton, or if you're interested in musical theatre, I highly recommend picking up Giles Terrera's Hamilton and Me. Next, I read Poison for Breakfast by Lemony Snicket. And it wasn't my favourite book, I'll be honest. I enjoyed it, but just not as much as I thought I would. I think that's partly my fault because I read it around October time, I think. When did I read this? Yeah, I finished this on the 5th of October, and so I was hoping for something a bit more spooky and autumnal, and that just isn't really what this is. So I think I just wasn't quite in the mood for it in the same way that I thought I would be. But it's basically about Lemony Snicket and how he receives a note just after he has finished his breakfast that reads, "You had poison for breakfast," and it's about him retracing his steps for the ingredients of all of his breakfast to try and find out how he's been poisoned. So if that sounds up your street, then by all means, go for it. Next up, I read the X Hex on my Kindle, and I loved it. It's by Erin Sterling, and it was exactly what I wanted. It was the perfect antidote to what I expected. Antidote poison. It was the perfect antidote to Poison for Breakfast, because it was exactly what I wanted. It was spooky, it was witchy, it was autumnal, and steamy and romantic. It's about this woman called Vivian Jones who has a sort of fling when she's in her late teens with a guy called Reese Penhallow, and he breaks her heart because he's actually betrothed to someone else. They're all witches, by the way. Vivian and Reese, they're all witches. Reese is betrothed to somebody else, and he breaks Vivian's heart, and she accidentally hexes him. She thinks she's just doing like a silly fake spell, but it turns out it was real. But then years later, Reese has to return to charge the ley lines of the town that Vivian lives in, and they meet again, and things start to go disastrously wrong, and suddenly Vivian realises maybe she did actually curse him all those years ago after all. Next, another middle grade, I read Witch Girl by Jan Eldridge. This is another wonderful, wholesome read about a girl who is a haunt huntress, or at least she's a haunt huntress's apprentice. She's learning how to be a haunt huntress, and she is waiting to come into her full power, and she will know that she's come into her full power when she gets her, what's it called? When she gets her familiar. That's what it's called, a familiar. And she will know what her familiar is when an animal comes to her and lays its head down at her feet. Then she will know that that is her familiar, and she has come into her full haunt huntress powers. But then her and her grandma, who is also a haunt huntress, they are called to this creepy old mansion where there is a woman who has been bitten by what they think is a rougarou, which just means trouble for everyone. It's sweet, it's action-packed, it's wholesome. Go for it. Next, I read One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid on my Kindle, and the reason I picked this one up before any of her others is because the wonderful Andy Fickman, who directed Heathers, is now directing the movie of One True Loves. Super, super cool. So I wanted to read it, and it broke my heart into a million tiny little pieces. It's about this woman called Emma who meets this guy called Jesse when she's at school, and they fall in love and they grow up and they get married, and then he goes off on a job because they're both like travel writers. He goes off on a job where he has to be in a helicopter, and the helicopter goes down, and he then is never seen. His body is never recovered, and so she has to just deal with the fact that her husband has been presumed dead or is missing, and she will probably never see him again. So 2 or 3 years go by, and in that time she meets and falls in love with somebody else who she also knew from school, a guy called Sam. And a few weeks before she is due to be remarried to Sam, she gets a call, and it is Jesse. he isn't dead, he is no longer missing, he has been found, and he is coming home. And the whole book is basically dealing with Emma's loss and her grieving for her husband, and then her coming to terms with that and, you know, letting herself open up to somebody else and fall in love with somebody else. And then it's about her whole world being turned upside down by her husband coming back. And it's just amazing. It is so good. It's so sensitively written. It's so honest. It's just great. Taylor Jenkins Reid is just a genius, and I think I'm gonna love everything she ever writes, to be completely honest with you. One True Loves. If you want to get your heart shattered into 1,000 million tiny little shards, read One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Then on the plane home from Lapland, I started reading The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa, and it's just a beautiful, wholesome, lovely book about a boy called Rintaro Natsuki who has just lost his grandfather, and he is having to leave his grandfather's bookshop, which he loves very, very much, but he's kind of lost his way a little bit. He's retreated into himself. He doesn't really know who he is anymore. He's become a bit of a recluse. He stopped going to school, and there's a girl called Sayo who is coming to him every day to give him his homework assignments and just to kind of make sure that he's okay. And then all of a sudden, this cat appears in the bookshop who talks to him and says, I need you to come with me. There are 3 labyrinths, and each labyrinth has a person at its centre who is stealing books or doing bad things to books, who's destroying books, who is locking books up and keeping them locked up in his mansion so no one else can read them. And he enlists the help of Rintaro and eventually Sayo to go and release these books and free these books from these people who love books, but in a very strange way that means these books are no longer being enjoyed or used or read in the ways that books should be enjoyed, used and read. And it's just gorgeous. It's just a wonderful, short, wholesome read. This is a 5-star from me. I loved it from start to finish. Definitely read it. Then yesterday, I was like, right, I want to read a couple stories, just short ones before the year is out. So I read 2 books yesterday. One was 80 pages and one was 104 pages. The first one I read was Evidence of an Affair by, you guessed it, Taylor Jenkins Reid. It was only 80 pages and I was like, sod it, just download it on my Kindle, let's go. The reason I picked this one up, I'll be honest, is because one of the main characters was called Carrie. And I was like, that would be lovely to read about a character who also has my name. The book takes form of letters back and forth, and it's just such a simple but a really clever idea. It's this woman called Carrie who discovers that her husband is having an affair, and she writes to the husband of the woman that her husband is having an affair with. I think I said that right. I think that makes sense. She basically says, our partners are having affairs with each other. I found a bunch of letters from your wife to my husband. If you want me to send them to you, I will, but basically I'm asking you a favour and I want you to send me anything that you find. If there are letters from my husband to your wife, please can you send them to me? And basically they start corresponding back and forth. I'll leave it there. It's only 80 pages, so again, I feel like if I say too much, I'm just going to reveal the entire plot of the book, but it's really great. It's again one of those really emotional, morally ambiguous, complicated grey area stories, which I just love so much, and I think that's where Taylor Jenkins Reid shines. So it's only 80 pages. Read it. It's lovely, and it's just great. It's just a really good read. There's no more to say on it. It's just a really good read, and it's a short one. You could whack it out in an evening. Go for it. And then I read Heatwave by Victor Jestin, which was one of the books that I bought in the Waterstones 50% off all hardback sale. Yes, I went. Yes, I bought 7 books. Please do not judge me. Before I get into what this story is about, there should be content warnings and trigger warnings with this book. I'll put a trigger warning up now before I start talking about this book. And again, it's only 104 pages, so I won't give too much away, but trigger warnings here now. So this book is about a boy called Leo, who is on holiday at this kind of like beach camp site with his family, and on one night he sees another teenage boy, take his own life. And instead of alerting someone or trying to help, because when he gets to this boy, he's not actually completely dead and he could have helped this boy. Instead, he kind of goes into shock and doesn't know what to do. And then instead of telling someone what's happened, he buries the body. It's then basically about him being absolutely terrified that the body's going to be found and he's going to be blamed for the murder of this boy. And it's quite dark and quite gritty and very primal. It's not a comfortable read, like, by a long shot. So if you want something that's going to make you feel uncomfortable from start to finish, read Heatwave. But it is good, and the writing is sublime. The writing is amazing, but it's obviously just quite dark, and I feel like you need to be in the mood to read something like this before you read it, if that makes sense. So there is still 2 and a bit days left to December, and I am gonna give it my best shot to try and read something else short in that time. But yeah, that is everything that I read from July to December. I wanted to read 50 books this year, and so far I have read 54. I'm gonna try and make it 55 before the year is out, so I'm thrilled with that. That is a wonderful turnout. I am really, really happy with that. I'm gonna try again next year to read 50 books. Maybe I'll up it to 60 and see how I go, considering I, was only 5 books away from that anyway, or 6 books away from that anyway. Let me know how many books you read this year. Let me know which ones were your favourites. And I am gonna do a top 10 favourite reads over on Prattle and Pages. Maybe a live stream, maybe an IGTV, even though IGTV still terrify me and I don't really know how to use it. Or a reel, who knows? But go and follow Prattle and Pages on Instagram and we will find out together. See you soon.